Thank you very much, Dirk. Okay, I've been telling you we have an interview, and this is the time. Peter Robbins and I had a conversation a couple days ago, and here it is for your listening pleasure. Very insightful. If you recall, Peter wrote the book Left at East Gate. So without further ado, this is Peter Robbins.
All right. Hello, everybody. We have a guest on the show today, Peter Robbins. Now, he's been here before, so he's no stranger to First Contact Radio. Just to refresh your memory, Peter Robbins is one of the best-known investigative writers and speakers with regard to the study of UFOs and their implications. He's been involved in the field for more than 30 years as a researcher, investigator, writer, lecturer, activist, and author. A regular fixture on radio shows across the country, he has also appeared as a guest and has been a consultant on numerous television shows and documentaries, and is also co-author of the British bestseller Left at East Gate, a first-hand account of the Rendlesham Forest UFO incident, its cover-up and investigation. Peter, welcome back to First Contact Radio. How are you today?
Joshua, fine. It's good to be back with you on the air.
Certainly. Well, we're glad to have you here. So last time that you were on, we were talking about your book. We were talking about the Rendlesham incident, and you were getting ready to go off to the anniversary last December. So what kind of new information and updates did you find there that you're able to share with anybody?
Well, for anyone that has been following the case closely, the information that kind of came out at this 30th anniversary conference was quite interesting, and we will be following up and building on that in an upcoming conference this coming June. What happened was last December was indeed the 30th anniversary of the event, and a number of folks here in the States and certainly all over the United Kingdom were looking forward to some kind of event, even a series of talks or something modestly set to mark the occasion. And as we were coming into last autumn, nobody had been able to pull it together. And I received a note on my Facebook page from an old friend in Suffolk, UK, which is the site of where these events took place in 1980. Gordy Godger, Goodger, who organized a talk for my co-author and I when we were on our 15-city speaking tour back when the book was a bestseller. And he said, I'm frustrated that this is the case, and if you'd like, I'll put together something where you and Larry can come to Suffolk and speak to folks. I thought that would be great. Talked to Larry about it. Mm-hmm. And Larry kind of caught me off guard. He was particularly magnanimous, and he said, so many people are aware of my account, either by reading the book or seeing us on television or hearing us speak over the years. Let's give this one to Jim and John, meaning Jim Penniston and John Burroughs, the two other leading witnesses who have come out over the past years, both involved on the first night and I believe John on the second. And they snapped it up, and on December 28th, which would have been the exact to-the-day 30th anniversary of the last night's incident, we were packed to overflowing with 400-plus people in the Woodbridge Suffolk Community Center. And myself and Linda Howe spoke, as did Jim and John. Larry was more interested in just being there. He came up and said a few words, and Nick Pope also graciously lent his time, although Nick appeared on the panel with us but did not give a talk. And not surprisingly and appropriately, the center of attention was Jim and John. And they chose that night to make some new information public, although it was hardly new. And this is something that, again, a number of your listeners are certainly aware of, that on the first night, to compress things a bit, they encountered a craft of undetermined origin in the woods. I would guess remote controlled. It was, I think, about 7 feet on each side and tapered upward in a triangular shape. It had the appearance of black glass. There were markings on it, call them hieroglyphics or symbols or what have you. I don't know if we have a word for it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are bits of missing time here that the men experienced and are still trying to work through with therapists, hypnotherapists. But among other things, Jim impulsively touched the craft, and he told us on that night that when he did, literally pages of binary code downloaded into his head. Now, I'm talking about something here I've still yet to fully wrap my head around, and I'm doing my best to educate myself to what he said, but that in the same notebook, which has been used in a number of documentaries about the event, showing the little drawings in his handwriting,
mm-hmm.
he then copied out like 11 pages of ones and zeros. And I understand that people who are knowledgeable in this binary code have broken the code, and that there is a message in there from these other intelligences. The reaction in the audience was palpable, more than just about any other audience I can remember. These people not only were informed about the event they were there to learn more about, but most of them being local, grew up with this as the most singular impacting event of the life in the region. And many people in the audience were civilian witnesses to one part or another. There were a number of retired military personnel there, British, who also had, experienced or seen bits of what had happened. And they were angry. They were angry, in part because why have you waited 30 years to come forward about this? Well, Larry left the service with an honorable discharge 6 months after the event in May of 1981. Jim and John stayed in. I believe they were both in the Air Force for over 20 years. I can only imagine the ramifications of speaking out on something like this while they were in the service. But they were also filming a documentary with Linda Howe on this part of the events. And it became more frustrating to the audience because Jim would not kind of reveal the whole thing because they were holding that for this television documentary. So it was quite emotional and somewhat frustrating, but very moving as well. And no more than when John was answering questions. And John has got to be 6'5". He's a big guy. He's imposing. He's well-spoken. He's passionate. But he is haunted by whatever the hell happened to him that night. And I know that some folks who are hearing us now have seen him in conference, along with Linda in some cases, and very courageously airing segments of tapings of him under with his hypnotherapist. And he is terrified and allegorically, so to say, is so far not gone through that last door to find out what it is that is engendering so much fear. But as I mentioned to you the other day, a question came up. John, is it true, as I've heard, that when you encountered this object in the woods, you pulled your service weapon and went into a two-handed stance? And I'm characterizing this here. I don't have, the transcript in front of me. John, I'm not sure. It may have happened. I just don't know if it was real or a memory that was created. John, did you jump on the thing, as I've heard, and it went X amount of, distance with you before you let go? I don't know. I may have. I don't know whether it's a real memory or implanted. John, you abducted. I don't know. I'm still trying to get to that. And that night, at 11:30, after 5.5 hours of intense dialogue, about 150 of us and their film team accompanied us back to the old east gate of RAF Woodbridge, where the lights were first sighted on that Monday, on that first night of events. And they spoke for half an hour, 40 minutes. It was very compelling and quite an end to a very memorable evening. And where we stand right now is Gordy and a colleague of his are once again taking on the imposing assignment of creating a follow-up conference, which will take place the weekend of June 16th and 17th, again back in Suffolk at the Woodbridge Community Center. And it will, again, feature myself and Larry and Jim and John.
Okay.
And in a touch that I think will put this conference over the top of being completely sold out, for the first time in 19 years, Travis Walton is returning to the United Kingdom.
Oh, wow.
And, yeah, exactly. So the first day will be devoted to, I believe, mostly Jim and John and the new information that they say they're going to hold until that event. And the second day, I expect I'll be speaking, Travis will be speaking, we'll be screening Fire in the Sky, and he'll be taking questions afterwards. And as you can imagine, we're really excited about it and very much looking forward to it.
That sounds like a good conference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've seen Travis at several different conferences, and they play Fire in the Sky quite often. I'm sure this guy has seen that movie over and over and over again.
Travis is a remarkable man.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us, don't just have admiration and respect for him. I just love the guy. He is character to spare, and in the course of going from being, a fairly rural American working class logger
Mm-hmm.
to being a statesman for this extraordinary phenomena that we call, UFO abduction, he has become one of the most thoughtful and highly intentioned speakers I've ever heard in any subject. For me, his word is absolutely bond, and he is nothing if not patient and understanding, and I expect however many times he's seen that film,
Mm-hmm.
he may see it that many times again, or at least, be there at the screenings and then take every question that's put to him about it.
Right.
He, of course, we had him speak at Roswell when I was working for the city there, and I'm not sure if that was when you heard him talk, but
that's when I met him.
Now that was an amazing presentation, in part because in a weekend of terrific presentations, and I believe we had about a dozen absolutely outstanding speakers there, you couldn't jam a piece of paper into that room. When he was there, and you could have heard a pin drop. And
Right, I remember that.
Night when we screened the film, pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, very kind man, and just seems to be, a lot of high integrity, and just kind is the word that always comes to mind whenever I think of him, how kind he always was and humble.
Yeah, well, I think that's a mark of a truly great man or woman, and you've said it very well. There's a humility, there's a patience, and there's a compassion that
Mm-hmm.
come with having gone through something extraordinary, learn what lessons you can, and applying it to an understanding of the fact that a lot of people go through things that are life-changing, even if they're not, in giant wiggly capital letters and make world news as his abduction did. And let's remember, the reason it went out on the wire services and was news all over the world for the, 4 or 5 days that he was missing,
Mm-hmm.
was because of, in terms of the absolutely unemotional, sarcastic, tabloid-minded media, that his friends, his coworkers, had reported him as being, knocked unconscious or killed by a blue beam of light from a very close-up UFO, and then they themselves were accused of murder and hiding.
Right.
And that in itself made that newsworthy all around the world.
Right. Quite a fascinating story. So,
Big time. And his book, Fire in the Sky, is, of course, highly recommended by you and I.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to ask you your thoughts on, with the UFO phenomena where it is these days. Now, Stephen Bassett has, made great strides to get this petition, and the White House is now coming out with what they say is a response, which is really the typical no response that we usually get from them. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah. I like Steve. I consider him an esteemed colleague, and I tremendously admire his activism. He is the only person we have in the so-called Beltway area that is those of us who take this subject extremely seriously and would like others to do so as well, and to be educated to the reasons why we take it seriously. And I'm not talking about, far out accounts or some kind of New Age nonsense. I'm talking about the same kind of evidence that one could present in a court of law: declassified government documents, physical evidence, multiple witnessing, etc. But what Steve has done here is mount an international effort that's focused right now in this country and kind of spread out to the exo-political community around the world, that Americans that want, this subject to not just to be brought to the attention of the executive branch and movers and shakers in Washington, but to create a movement that I think he is sort of basing on the anti-war movement of the 60s and early 70s that contributed tremendously to our leaving Vietnam and ending a very wrong war that was built on principles that simply were fictitious. The idea of the domino theory that if we allowed South Vietnam to fall, then the rest of Southeast Asia would fall to the communists like dominoes, and that simply did not happen. Steve was able to raise and submit at the point that he did, because I think signatures are probably going to keep coming in, a 25,000-person petition, which is, of course, respectable. However, the government, and no matter what any of us feel in terms of the current government, or whether we see ourselves on the left or the right or the Tea Party or the Occupy movement, Republicans, Democrats, is a non-issue. The fact is that every single administration, in effect, treated this subject the same, which is to ignore it, and every once in a while, where necessary, to downplay it. The White House says there is no evidence of life beyond Earth, and have literally used the Paradigm organization that Steve runs as an opportunity to restate this. And the quote is, "The U.S. government has no evidence that any life exists outside a planet or that an extraterrestrial presence has contacted or engaged any member of the human race." Now, that is such a huge, as far as I'm concerned, respectfully, a huge lie, that, but it's said with a straight face. And then, of course, the strategy is to say, but, we're fascinated by the subject and we take it seriously as a possibility. And even though we're not looking right behind us or right in front of us or in our own skies, we are, of course, pushing the SETI project, the Mars Science Laboratory, and the Kepler astronomical telescope and all that stuff. It's infuriating and, for me, completely expected. And I think, we will see how things shake down over the next weeks and months. But I think that it's kind of a shame that all of this effort that has gone into creating this petition and submitting it to government has now been used as their opportunity to dismiss it yet once again.
Right.
And in my mind, I'm trying to figure how, to take the next step. I expect that if we haven't already, Steve will be sending out some kind of memorandum on just that. But for me, the answer is not another 25,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 signatures. They'll simply say it again. And the mantra for the naive, for the uninformed, for the skeptical, no, not the skeptical. We should all be skeptics on this, and good hard ones, and the debunkers, and those with an interest in terms of the power structure of keeping things just the way they are. And most of us in the human race swimming underwater or sleepwalking our way through our lives, is it can't be. Therefore it isn't. therefore it must be something else. Or if it were, surely it would have leaked by now. Well, of course it has 1,000 times, but it doesn't end up on the nightly news. It doesn't end up on, major news services on the Internet or the front page of the New York Times. It ends up, on a UFO chat site or the MUFON Journal or another very small relative venue for the converted who already take this seriously. So
Absolutely.
we're in a quandary here, for sure.
Mm-hmm. It just seems really irresponsible of the government and the media, the way they propose it, because at the same time they'll say things like there's an alien invasion to be prepared for. And I've heard it on Fox, I've heard it on CNN, I've heard Michio Kaku come on and talk about it.
Yeah.
Well, how could they talk about an alien invasion and then have a statement like this? This is just irresponsible of them, and it just fits right in. How do you know that the Obama administration is lying? Their lips are moving. So if this is the statement that they're making, then what's the opposite? That there is something out there. We have evidence, and we have been communicated with. So,
well, indeed, Josh. And, of course, let's remember that you can substitute the Obama administration, just put in the blank there, and any administration since and including President Truman's administration.
Right.
It's just, there's only two things going on. There's love and there's fear. They have different manifestations. They have different names. Fear, contraction, anxiety, go down the list. And I think part of the problem here is institutional and the rest is theoretical. Number one, if you think about how a pearl forms, it's a piece of sand that layers and layers of the substance manufactured by the pearl's owner create this beautiful thing. But it is an irritant, and you have built up layers around the irritant that make it a little more easy to carry around. If we were to admit, if the president were to go on TV tonight and say, my fellow Americans, it's my solemn duty to blah, 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 number one, he and every other American president from Truman on down would kind of have to be seen on a certain level as an unindicted co-conspirator in the greatest conspiracy to keep the most important truth from people of this country and the world. And that's bad PR. It would also damn the Republicans and the Democrats. It would also make our military crazy. I think rather than hiding a huge amount of what we know, and what we know is purely theoretical, a great deal of the secret-keeping history and apparatus may be in response to how little we have learned over the last 64 years or whatever it's been now. And, we're dealing with a world of guys who are in the most powerful positions in world government, and the illusion of power can be more important than the actual power. If this comes out, then everything's up for grabs. We're no longer the biggest flea on the back of the cosmic dog, and the implications in terms of the fundamentalist religious community as opposed to the religious community at large, who I think will fare through this, serviceably and come out still believing in God and moving forward. If anything, this will underscore the nature of, the miracle of creation, so to say, out to the edges of the cosmos. But for anyone, and please understand, this is not in any way associated with any specific religion. Fundamentalism is also absolutely applicable to secular thinking. It implies a tremendous rigidity of thought. And if you are open to a little latitude in interpretation, Buddhists will do better with this than fundamentalist Christians or fundamentalist Muslims. All one needs to do is study the history of these religions to see why. But these are some of the implications. Also, as friend and colleague Stanton Friedman has pointed out on numerous occasions, the name of the game here is technology and military technology. Whoever gets this, if we have effectively fully back-engineered what we have captured from the event in Roswell in 1947, and been able to apply that, or are able to apply that to advanced weapon systems, we win. or we win for now, because
Mm-hmm.
it's not apples and oranges. It's, knives against machine guns, basically.
Right.
And, screw all of the, welcome the Space Brothers and anything that we can learn from this or apply in a life affirmative manner. And that is part of the nature of the crisis that we face right now in terms of government
Mm-hmm.
and in terms of perception.
Absolutely. Well, I believe the truth is going to come out sooner than later, and that will be to all of our benefits. I want to turn our attention to another subject. Speaking of truth and truth seekers, not too long ago, we certainly lost one of them, and a dear friend of yours, Bud Hopkins. I was wondering if you might want to speak to any of your, fond memories of Bud and some of the things that, that you knew of him.
Yeah. Bud passed away in August at the age of 80 after having fought quite a battle against leukemia for years and then liver cancer, which proved fatal. And, you're right, Josh. He was a dear friend as well as an esteemed colleague, a mentor, somebody I worked with and worked for over the decades. And I guess I'm one of the luckiest people because I got to spend a good part of 35 years with him, and a part of that at his side in investigation into what many of us consider the greatest mystery that we are facing here on Earth. Bud was a good man, but he was also a great man. And for people listening who are not familiar with him, I will say he was a highly respected artist, specifically best known for his paintings, which kind of came out of abstract expressionism. And the marvelous work, I have to say. He also is the dean, the father, the most significant individual in the then literally unknown field, going back to the 1970s here, of UFO-related abduction research. Some people say, alien abduction. I think the word is misleading because we don't know, again, what we're really dealing with here. I think it's logical to think that we're talking about intelligences from out there somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But, again, with respect to what we don't know, kind of, you like to use a little latitude with language here. And at a time when literally all of his colleagues and individuals in the field coming out of the 60s and into the 70s were focusing their attention on documents, very important, lights in the night sky, military, radar reports, anomalous objects observed by credible witnesses. Bud was turning his attention to the intelligences that built and operate these things, what they're doing here, what they're doing with many, many more people than most people would be comfortable even considering of individuals worldwide that this phenomenon touches. And he, at first, almost single-handedly, he did. He carved out an area of research, and, it's amazing the resources that we have in us. Bud was a trained painter, and a good one. And coming from that same background, being a graduate of New York's Distinguished School of Visual Arts, and I'm proud to say a faculty member there on their continuing education painting faculty for many years, we were trained to think out of the box and to not look at things maybe with the normal eye of somebody, in the business world or what have you, not to demean anybody in the business world, but his natural abilities as an investigator or detective would have been highly regarded by any police organization in the world, and we interfaced with many people in law enforcement over the years, some who were abductees or experiencers, however you want to use that word, others who joined with us in helping us to investigate. And he is not just a fine writer. he was an uncannily fine writer. I had the privilege of proofreading a lot of his work as it came out of the printer, and in a lighthearted way, it used to irritate the hell out of me. I don't know anybody that ever nailed it better on the first draft. I was struggling with paragraphs and left at East Gate, 6 years into revisions, published, 9-10 years later. But he was just able to hit the mark repeatedly. He was phenomenally courageous, had a world-class curiosity, but was informed. Well, the thing for me that I'll never, ever forget is his basic humanity and his kindness and his patience with the people who came to him. He was a lot of fun, too. He had a great sense of humor. He loved his life. He was aware that the New York City art world, which is a rather unforgiving entity, when he began to write about UFOs, and then certainly in 1981 when his first book, Missing Time, was published, giving the English lexicon yet one more important phrase,
right,
and broke the subject open big time. Up until then, it was, let's take a look at Betty and Barney Hill's incident again, the seminal first case in modern abduction studies. He became someone who, for some snooty intellectuals in the art field, was less respected because, if you're an artist living and working in New York in the international marketplace, you're not supposed to be involved in something like that. It does not reflect well on your ivory tower mentality. And I'm serious here. And it infuriated me because it didn't affect his work in anything. He was all the more passionate about the times that he could grab, which were increasingly few because of his dedication to this field. Also, some people that know him, as an author, speaker, an investigator, and a very positive presence are not aware that his work is in New York's Museum of Modern Art, in the Metropolitan Museum of Art on Fifth Avenue, in museums and collections all over America, all over Europe, and I know in Asia as well. He has left a remarkable legacy, and for those of us who were lucky enough to know him, we're the better for it. And for me, part of my grieving process has been to, with good people like you, allowing me to spend a few minutes talking about him.
Sure.
I have two published pieces, one for any of your listeners who are subscribers to Open Minds magazine. There's a remembrance by me of Bud in that. And anyone who would like to read a completely other treatment, you can subscribe to a wonderful British online free monthlies on the paranormal. One called, I think it's Mindscape, and the other Phenomena magazine.
Okay.
So make a note of those and subscribe to those. But, it's funny, Josh. The longer you live, the more people you lose, and that's part of the nature of life. And
right.
No big surprise. And losing somebody who has lived an amazingly full life at 80 years old is not a tragedy. And then, last month the memorial we had for him in New York was really lovely and really, if he had been there, we would have had a great time. But otherwise, we did as good as we could. But I still miss him tremendously and always will. And again, I'm one of the lucky ones because I actually got to know him better than a lot of people and try to carry some of his values through to in the work that I continue to do.
Well, that sounds great. And as you said, the world is a better place, not only because he was here, but because of the information he left behind for future researchers to continue on with, where he started.
That's well said. And like any true pioneer, especially in the world of science or history, or a truly, truly original, a new area of study, you're attacked like crazy until, reality proves you right. And Galileo probably would not have been burned at the stake by the Catholic Church if they had been more enlightened. And it's nice that they've apologized in the past decade for doing that, for him having the heresy to even suggest that the Earth revolves around the sun rather than the Earth being the center of the universe.
Right.
Or some people I know, it's the center of the universe, and they're in the center of that universe. But we are a speck of dust in the cosmos that is trying to figure out what we're doing here and not destroy itself too quickly, although sadly the world of men seems very committed to doing just that.
Sometimes it seems that way. So, Peter, how would somebody get in touch with you? Like, do you have a website that they can go to? Where would they contact you?
Thanks. I have a site, but it's really kind of dead in the water right now. I hope to have a new website up by the end of this year or early next year. In the meantime, anybody is welcome to contact me through my Facebook page, and there are a couple of us Peter Robbins is there, so sort it out and you'll figure it out. Or they can just email you and you can forward it on to me. But I'm out there, and my next talk will be in the Philadelphia area on the, ironically, I hope it doesn't bode poorly, on the 22nd of November, the anniversary of the Kennedy assassination. I am upbeat that nothing bad will happen. And it will be on the Rendlesham Forest incident. Also, planning ahead a little bit more, I'm very excited to say that I will be a speaker at next year's International UFO Congress, held under the auspices of Open Minds magazine, the Open Minds organization, this coming February in Phoenix. And last year was their first year taking over this almost 20-year institution that had been going on annually in Laughlin, Nevada. And they did brilliantly. I actually had work across town in a completely unrelated area for that part of February, but I got to get over there at least once, and they pulled in somewhere between 12 and 1,500 people. And the old conference was mind-boggling. As you know, it was 7 days with up to 30 speakers from 10 countries. 4 days with 20 speakers ain't bad. And it is quite a lineup, and you can simply go to the Open Minds website to find out information on that, or IUFOC, International UFO Congress. Google it and click.
Excellent. Well, Peter, thank you so much for being on the show. We'll have to have you on again sooner than later next time.
Well, Josh, I'm glad to, and speak to you soon.
Thank you very much.